Okay, it's 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and call the July 10th, 2023 meeting to order, and we will begin with roll call, please.
Walters. Here. Dvorak.
Here.
Sarchet.
Here.
Vogel. Here. Anderson.
Here. So item number 3 is approval of agenda, but before I ask for a motion, just want council members to know that we need to amend the agenda. Item 8D, Snyder and Associates May invoice should be listed in the amount of $35,411.75. You see it says $15,000 plus there. Needs to be amended. So then I will go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second?
Second.
And roll call.
Dvorak.
Yes.
Sarchet.
Yes.
Vogel. Yes. Anderson.
Yes.
Yep.
Walters.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to move ahead to a presentation. Item number 4 rather, swear-in ceremony. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Swearing-in ceremony. Police Officer Craig Garrison and Police Sergeant Nick Sherman.
They're on their way.
To be called.
I think they're just hanging out outside waiting for this. They can clear out.
Well, I'll come down then.
Here we go.
Yes.
Wow.
I might do it over here just so there's a little room.
Just for the record,
can
because
wherever
we do
you
get questions about why we're building a new city hall.
Where are they? Which one's first? Police Officer Craig Garrison.
All right, I'll kind of do an introduction here.
Okay.
This one. All right. We'll start with Craig Garrison, our new officer here. You know, you were probably totally opposite. So Craig started the police department early in June of this year. He's already deep into his field training program we do here, and he'll be leaving mid-August to attend the Hawkeye Regional Police Academy. So he's a 2022 graduate of Simpson College, where he received his degree in criminal justice and ran track. We're excited to have him on board. Come on, step on up here.
Is that that one?
That was yep. One's a copy.
Okay. So, does he have to?
Raise your right hand, put your left hand on.
See? Okay, cool. So I state your name.
Craig Garrison.
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution. Oh, you say that part.
You have to give him the other copy to do that.
Oh, you don't have that memorized?
We're just going to read a little bit of it back to you.
Oh, he needs to repeat it back to me?
Either way.
All right. Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully, partially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all of the duties of a police officer for the city of Polk City,
discharge all of the duties of a police officer for the city of Polk City,
Iowa,
Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Great. Congratulations.
Yes. And then we have some signatures. Okay.
Or just with 3 of you.
Yeah, step up.
Yeah, let's go over here.
Okay.
Let's have the council kind of behind us, okay?
Okay.
That would be cool. Thank you. Again, congratulations.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, just sign right.
Do you have this copy?
I think it's in his hand.
I am.
This is for him.
Okay.
This is please.
Okay, understood.
You can get that too.
Thank you. All right, next, a few months back, we started the promotional process for the rank of sergeant. During this process, we did panel interview with sergeants from around the metro that came in and assisted, tactical tabletop exercise, and also a one-on-one interview with me. At the conclusion of this, I had selected Officer Nick Sherman to be promoted to the rank of sergeant. So Nick, you want to step on up here? All right, raise your right hand, left hand look.
Great. So, I
I, Nick Sherman,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all of the duties of a police sergeant for Polk City, Iowa,
discharge all of the duties of a police sergeant in the city of Polk City, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Good. Congratulations.
Thanks, sir.
His wife is going to pin his new badge on.
Bring it home, bud. You're tender. I trust you.
Okay. No pressure.
Oh yeah, the first time on these shirts. It's pretty tough. We can do a picture.
Okay.
Your head in there, funny. Okay.
Okay. Again, congratulations.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Signature. Yeah. Correct. I just have 3 letters.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 5 is a presentation, and Chief will handle that.
I have 3 letters of recognition I'd like to give some of my staff today. These are over incidents that occurred over this past year that I think they need some recognition for. So I'll read through them, bear with me, the first one's kind of long, they get shorter after that. In keeping with the highest standards of the Polk City Police Department, Officer Sherman and Plaha Polson went above and beyond expectations during a months-long narcotics trafficking investigation beginning in late 2022. On March 5th, 2023, about 8 o'clock, Officer Sherman and Blaha Polson received information of the subject with an outstanding arrest warrant visiting a resident suspected of trafficking narcotics on the 300 block of East Van Dorn Street. The subject was wanted on parole warrant violation and was known to abuse drugs, have violent tendency, and was considered armed and dangerous. Officer Sherman and Blaha Polson worked as a team to conduct surveillance on the subject's vehicle. At about 9 o'clock, the subject was seen leaving the residence in his vehicle with an accomplice. Officers Sherman and Blaha Polson executed a high-risk traffic stop on the vehicle. The subject and his accomplice were taken into custody at gunpoint without incident. Recognizing his involvement in narcotics trafficking, the officers summoned a police canine to the scene. The canine alerted to narcotics in the vehicle. The search of the vehicle resulted in a seizure of about 1 pound of methamphetamine, a half a pound of marijuana, and numerous items of drug paraphernalia, including packaging materials. Additionally, over $16,000 in cash was also seized from the vehicle. Both subjects were charged with numerous crimes, including 2 counts of possession of controlled substance with intent to deliver. The efforts of these officers resulted in the execution of a search warrant of the residence in the 300 block of East Van Street the next day. In addition, additional amounts of methamphetamine, marijuana, and paraphernalia were seized during that search warrant. Officer Sherman and Officer Blah Polson's effort effectively ended narcotic trafficking operation in Polk City. Use and sale of illicit drugs in the community commonly result in deteriorating living conditions and increased property crime and violent crime rates. Conclusion of this trafficking operation through the efforts of Officer Sherman and Officer Blah Polson ensured the Polk City community remains safe, or a safe community to live and work. So, if you guys would like to come up, I have a letter of recognition for each of you, and one will be placed in your personnel files.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
I got two more here. Excuse me, kind of losing my voice. All right. In keeping with the highest standards of the Polk City Police Department, Officers Whipple and Delaney went above and beyond during a traffic stop conducted on March 2nd. On March 2nd, Officer Whipple conducted a traffic stop in the 1600 block of West Bridge Road. Officer Delaney responded to assist. Officer Whipple and Delaney recognized the suspicious movements and behavior displayed by the driver as being consistent with deception. Officer Whipple and Delaney further investigated the situation and developed probable cause of search of the vehicle. During the probable cause search, the vehicle resulted in the seizure of basically psychedelic mushrooms, cocaine, ecstasy, LSD, and THC. A total of over 77 grams of mushrooms were seized. Officer Whipple and Delaney further investigated the case through interviews and eventually a search warrant on their phone. Evidence obtained in the interviews and the search warrant showed the suspect was involved in trafficking narcotics from Des Moines through Polk City to neighboring communities. The subject was charged with numerous drug charges, including 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver. Narcotics trafficking through a community often leads to increased property and violent crime rates, which result in decreased living conditions for our citizens. Officer Whipple and Delaney's efforts and focus on criminal interdiction during this motor vehicle stop ensured Polk City remains a safe place to live and work. So if you'd like to come up. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. All right, on March 15, 2023, at approximately 10 p.m., Officer Delaney was dispatched to a Polk City residence for a report of an overdose. Upon arriving on scene, Officer Delaney ascertained that the patient had overdosed on heroin. Officer Delaney retrieved Narcan from the medical bag of his patrol car and delivered 1 dose to the patient. The patient became more alert and was able to cooperate with Polk City medical personnel upon their arrival. Officer Delaney's commitment to excellence in the mission statement of the Polk City Police Department reflect great credit upon himself, the department, and the law enforcement profession. Alex, thank you.
I'd just like to
It's
thank you.
warm over here.
I've never seen all the police officers in one spot, so is anybody missing?
No.
Yeah, I mean, this is impressive. And for the work that you all do, any drugs off the street, I mean, you've literally saved somebody's life, right? I mean, conceivably, and the work with there's just so many drugs out there, and you guys know it, and you're being alert, you're looking for it, using the canine when needed, which is a wonderful program, with Matt. So thank you all for what you do. Honestly, our community is safe, and I feel that. I've felt it for many years, and we know that we're going to continue to have more as we grow, more officers, and the commitment to the city is very important. So thank you for all you guys and gals.
I echo that. You know, I think that people think Polk City is a very safe place to live, and some of the things I see, you know, that you guys do, I mean, people have no idea. And again, a lot of this is pass-through traffic, things like that. So thank you for giving us all the security feeling that we have living here, that we are safe and protected. And I say too, to all the families for your support of these individuals. I know they're the ones here doing it, but they leave you to go out and do this for us. So thank you.
Because of you, that's why the city wins awards.
Appreciate you guys, thank you.
Hey, Craig, good luck in the academy. Service prop, when do we get out? How long does it take?
You have a mustache
Just in
by
time.
then?
Yeah, you have to have a mustache. I'm like,
Way to
wait,
pass his, so I can,
good luck with that, though. Thank you.
thank
Now
you.
we can
Thank
talk.
you. Thank you.
Coming.
Have a good night.
Okay, so we're going to move on to item number 6, which is the public comment period. This is the time and place for comments for any item other than those that are a public hearing. Has anyone contacted us, Jenny, about speaking?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to item number 7, which is the consent items, and I will ask for a motion to approve the consent items, please.
I'll move.
And a second,
Second.
and roll call.
Dvorak,
Yes.
Sarchet,
Yes.
Vogel,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Walters.
Yes.
So we'll move on to 8, 8A, Resolution 2023-91, approving Jester Business Group site plan amendment. And I think we're going to begin with a representative from Jester Business Group. We'll ask you to identify yourself, please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Wally Peltz with Peltz Design Services, 2323 Dixon Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50316. We're here before you with a simple site plan to bring our site into compliance. We found this to be the most expeditious way to get it done. What we found, we presented to planning and zoning. I was unable to attend. I apologize because I have much better knowledge than my representative that I sent. She did a good job. However, we would disagree with the resolution that's proposed, asking for a 25-foot buffer to remain on the western portion. That was a process that we went through with city staff when we simplified the site plan to get it into compliance. And my information is that if we look at, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the ordinance of 165-19, and I just wanted to read from you real quick what the screening buffer ordinance talks about. It talks about the intent of the screening regulation here and after set forth is to lessen the transmission from one property to the other of noise, dust, glare, to lessen pollution by creating impressions of separation of spaces and entirely shielding one land use from another, and or establishing a sense of privacy, visual or physical intrusion. What the discussion is that there was some confusion, at least on our part, when we were recommending to our client. There is a 0-foot building setback buffer along the west boundary of this property. That has been approved by the Board of Adjustment. However, the technical vacation of the buffer requirement was not vacated. So there's a little conflict, at least in our opinion. Additionally, we reviewed the 2013 site plan that was approved by CDA, and then I looked at about 4 or 5 other site plans that delineate very specific buffers. Now there is a tree line shown on the CDA plan on the western buffer. However, real quickly, if I could pass out pictures of what it looks like right now, if I may. And this is, there should be enough for everybody. If you take and pass it down. And a final one.
Come on.
Sorry for all the pictures. I think pictures speak louder than what I could give you in a visual. So
Sorry.
the intent of the buffer is not to damage, harm, or lessen the value of the property next door. What you see in the aerial pictures next door is, at a minimum, there's 500 feet of floodplain, a maximum of 900 feet of distance of floodplain between TPI and our facility. So, yes,
All of these are since the site work that you did.
correct. So, because there should be that 2023 aerial that the county has, which is the one that's taken in the wintertime, which shows that one. That should give you the reference. Those other pictures are since the work that was done. So what we're identifying, there's at a minimum 500 feet of treed area. It is also identified as a floodplain in the within the FEMA flood map for your community. So unless you want to spend millions and millions of dollars bringing it out of floodplain, I do not see EPI doing that to bring it out of floodplain. Additionally, I did do research on the PUD that Tournament Club of Iowa did. Sorry, TCI, not TPI, TCI, where it says that the buffer is for the underlying zoning that was with it before. So in my experience, when we're doing zoning and buffer, if I'm coming in developing in this project, and this facility has been there since before they started, then the burden would be on them to create the buffer. So what I'm referencing is that we have at a minimum a 500-foot buffer that will probably never go away. And that 25 feet along that western boundary that was presented by planning and zoning, or recommended by planning and zoning, that actually represents a 1/4 acre of land for us. Now, we could put a building right on that property line according to what's been approved. However, that's not conducive to our phase 2 portion of what we're trying to accomplish. This is step 1, because we're trying to get our site into compliance. And the only contingency that we have with staff recommendation and that resolution is that 25 bucks, which again, when we discussed with your consultant, they said that that's a path that council has taken before. This is a unique location. I don't know where else you have a floodplain that has at least 500 foot of trees between us and them. If you look at the pictures, one's taken from the site, one's taken from the golf course. Even in the wintertime, 500 feet of wooded area will create a visual barrier, which in my opinion is more than what the screening is requiring. So we're asking the council for clarification and a relief from that via that request that we put in. Was that attached in the packet, that request for the 25-foot waiver?
Yes.
It was, okay. So that is what we are asking for. I know planning and zoning still wanted to see the 25-foot buffer along that edge. However, a couple of things that my associate didn't mention, to our south is the same Tournament Club of Iowa. Same property. There we have there's no buffer requested along that portion. It is mostly a building, but it's a fairly simple process. And again, I just wanted to reiterate, this is such a unique condition. I don't think you're setting a precedent, because I don't know where else you have floodway backing to a property that's at a minimum 500 feet, that's wood. And then beyond that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on the site plan portion.
So I guess, but if you, what are you actually asking for here? So we've got the recommendation for,
I'm asking for a 0-foot buffer on the west property. The
what planning and zoning recommended was
25 feet along that.
with the
Type B buffer,
planted back.
correct. And we understand it to the north, we're leaving that on our site plan on the north. It's the west that I've never buffered against the floodway before, most of the municipalities that I've worked in, so.
And I understand that, I guess, so I was at the planning and zoning summit for Dave that night, and there was a lot of confusion, and quite honestly, I think you put us in a bad spot with a couple things. You're prepared tonight, none of this information was available to planning and zoning, and so that led to a lot of questions and a lot of discussion, and which type of buffer, Board of Adjustment had gone back to the 0-foot buffer, but left that, what was it, right away, or, not right away,
0-foot building setback
Yes.
left the waiver.
right. Why would you do one and not the other? So it's hard to, like, a lot of things, right, to your point, but, so, I struggle with that because.
Rob?
Just for clarification, probably the reason that the Board of Adjustment did not deal with the buffer is because that's not something that they would normally, is in their purview.
Okay, but the intent of waiving the easement and not the buffer sort of conflicts with one another, right? I mean, that
building
setback.
The setback, that is a Board of Adjustment now.
Correct. So, again, why would you do one and not the other? It leaves interpretation, I think, on both parties here. So, I say all this to say that asking for us to go against our recommending body and P and Z is a problematic ask generally, and I think some of this could have been avoided with similar preparation. Now, is that completely on you? No, probably not. Predominantly, I would say it is, because, you need to be prepared for those meetings, hindsight's 20/20, whatever. But going back even further, I think they were justifiably looking for a reason, because work had been done without site plan approval. So probably the biggest issue of all of this, and no need to relitigate that, but I'm following the logic, but it's hard to follow the intent here is what I'm struggling with. Now, I think our job is to do the right thing regardless of what's happened, but it's important, one, because I both personally, and I don't speak for anybody else, but I want to maintain a good rapport with planning and zoning, and going against their recommendation doesn't do that. Now, it doesn't mean that it is our responsibility as the enacting group, not the recommending body. I get that. I'm not trying to deflect any responsibility, but I think all of this is not a path we want to go down going forward. Bruce, I know we've had conversations, and so I just want to get to a spot where the intent is clear, and the whatever you think about government's involvement here, the process needs to be adhered to. And so regardless of whichever way this goes, I think that needs to be stated, understood, and agreed upon, again, wherever the direction. Now, to the specific ask, I don't know that adding additional plantings as a buffer to something that is as extensive as is shown here and is as likely to be permanent as about anything we have. So to that piece, I can get on board with. And I've talked a lot to all that other others.
I do know that Travis has a report,
Okay,
but I did want to piggyback off of one thing you said about P and Z's recommendation. I think their biggest concern was allowing a property owner, regardless of what's behind them, to have a zero building setback. And their way of preventing that was to maintain the buffer.
correct.
So it wasn't so much about the buffer, at least from the minutes I took. It was more about if they waive the buffer, then it technically gives the property owner the ability to build all the way to their property zone based on the waiver they have from Board of Adjustments.
But as was stated that night, there are additional bites at that apple.
Yes.
For whatever work would be done to that point.
Understood. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on that point.
And that is a good clarification, because you know, zero, there's a reason why 0 foot setbacks exist. But again, when Board of Adjustment takes that action, I'm gonna screw it up again. What's the setback versus?
Variance.
No, the.
Oh, setback versus the buffer.
Right,
there's
so
a
we have
0 foot-
25 per,
There is a 0 foot setback, but technically per your code, as of right now, the requirement is a 50 foot type B, or type C. P and Z has recommended a 25 foot type B as a middle ground between completely waiving it and the code requirement, which your code allows council to specifically waive the buffer requirement to be a lesser buffer.
So Travis, is this part of your report?
That was basically my report. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well,
Well, hold on. I was just gonna have Mr. Pels thank you for your presentation. You don't have to stand there if you don't.
Oh, I love standing. I sit all day, so I don't mind standing here. And again, I want to apologize for the confusion. It was my understanding, we spoke with your staff and they said, you know what, just ask council for the buffer. We think that's probably the best solution to stop the confusion between the building setback and that buffer, right? So that's what we did. I felt comfortable leaving my associate in charge, and she's not as well versed on this project as I am.
no,
so
and again,
I apologize.
not looking for an apology necessarily. I'm just trying to expound on the kind of tough position that we're in here and how we got here.
So that's it from you. We'll move on to Travis's report then.
yep, so as I mentioned, kind of the history, and Wally's kind of covered a lot of the history of this project. Something worth noting is that the way that Jenny and I have prepared the resolution is your approval would be subject to provision of needed easement documents and plats by certain dates. So the draft documents would be due by the end of this week. Final signed documents by the 28th of July, with all improvements completed no later than October 1st, 2023. The idea behind that is the city attorney has already pursued and filed a municipal infraction for the removal of the illegal removal of buffer trees. That's currently stayed. But in order to keep this project moving forward, make sure everybody's on the same page, the resolution has been written with specific deadlines for submittal of documents.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're gonna move on then and move on to Resolution 2023-91, approving Jester Business Group Site Plan Amendment, and ask for a motion.
Well, I know we're supposed to talk about it after the motion, but
Yeah.
so you said second. I know it matters what type of motion that. Oh, good.
Well, this is just strictly this motion. I mean, this
So
this
if,
The resolution is written as P and Z's recommendation.
but they're not asking.
They're
for that.
asking for something different, so we either need a motion to approve this
Right.
resolution or to amend the resolution for what they're asking for and approve it that way.
Which is why I think our typical.
Did I say that
is
right,
out of order.
Amy?
But you can go ahead and put the motion on the table and then amend it as you need. So in order to start the discussion, if you have a motion and a second, that'll allow you to discuss. And then if you want to amend the motion that's on the table to change that buffer, that can be done in the context of your discussion.
So, motion to approve Resolution 2023-91. Did you have a motion? So, and a second? All right, so
Discussion?
Okay, so the concern with the buffer, is it the 25 foot or is it the plantings as well?
No, we're proposing plantings, it's just the 25-foot buffer, because then it doesn't allow for a detention base. Our phase 2 portion of the plan, which we had submitted, which we stripped all back down, that was built in the buffer, which I can't do at that point for stormwater management, because it's the most logical place to put it is right next to that floodway. So that's why we've asked for the 0 buffer or no buffer along that western boundary. We'll keep it along the northern 25 feet for the townhomes to the north, but we're asking for the westerly boundary of the property along that floodway.
Which again, with 600 to 900 foot of trees behind it, I don't know if it's particularly concerning to me.
Amy,
And I
can
would-
you have a buffer and allow something like stormwater in it? To still control nothing else being put in it.
I would ask the engineers on that, but probably
The way
there's
the
limitations, I'm sure.
yeah, the way the document's currently written, there is no allow intrusion in the buffer. We would have to probably look at the language as the easement's constructed to allow certain things, and that would be a collaboration between me. But there is, I mean, if that's a desire path forward. I mean, the problem is if you allow a detention basin to punch into a buffer, well, then it's not a buffer. I mean, you're essentially punching a hole in the buffer.
So based on the, Rob mentioned there wasn't this much information at P and Z. I don't know if we've sent anything back to P and Z.
These pictures were what was missing. Everything else was there. And I will tell you that I know at least 4 of the 7 P&Z members visited the site. So they were aware of the tree line and those kinds of things. I cannot speak for the ones that didn't say out loud, I walked up there, I'm on the golf course side or whatnot.
Yeah,
So,
and I think there was some confusion about some other properties, because I can't imagine even in the winter that you're gonna be able to see through 600 to 900 foot of trees, even when, like I said, winter, they don't have leaves, but
P&Z member Triplet says you can. I don't live up there, so I do not know. But
I'm not gonna vote against what P and Z says. What I was alluding to was if there's additional information that they did not have, that would help. I didn't know if there is, if we ever kicked anything back to them, like not a trial, but you basically got more information to look at so they can reconsider. I don't know. If there isn't, then I am gonna follow P and Z just like I do with parks because I'm not an expert in those areas. What was presented, if it wasn't satisfactory, that's not something I can control, right? On a certain day and a certain time, certain things. But I think we would be setting a very dangerous precedent if we were to go against what PZ has recommended, unless there's compelling information that they need to look at that was not.
well, so a couple things. There are different points on what can be in the buffer, clearly, right? So you're saying a detention, your plans would include a detention bond in that buffer, which is why you're asking not to have it.
Correct. In our next phase, which is the site plan, we're trying to comply with getting out of the violation. So we've stripped our plan down to about nothing, about fixing paving, turning gravel into paving, doing those things so we can get into compliance. If this goes through, then that buffer's in play, then that nullifies my other site plan. Then I'm back to square one. Then I'm looking at putting a building, because I have a 0-foot building setback all the way along to the buffer. So that's the part that's contradictory to us. And maybe, I don't know if planning and zoning didn't understand it, but I am certain that the buffer, which planning and zoning, the waiver comes to council. your ordinance says that council has the authority to waive it, right? So there is a vehicle to do this.
Well, and I would say too, in that meeting, they talked a lot about the type of buffer, which they landed on B, which you're saying isn't
Right.
a concern.
Well,
So-
I watched the whole thing on video just so I'd be well versed in it. I would disagree with Triplet about being able to see from one to the other. I guarantee you I can't see through there. I
You
don't
can't
know.
see through there today, but you can't guarantee what tournament club might do tomorrow.
I can guarantee that Tournament Club would need to get not only a FEMA, but they'd have to talk to the Army Corps of Engineers to do any work in that.
I understand that, but they can still do that.
Not in a FEMA designated floodway.
They can cut down trees.
Uh,
Absolutely can.
They potentially could. And
It doesn't matter. That's a moot point. What matters is you are trying to do something on your property and you're not taking into consideration the neighbor that could do the same thing. So what happens if they do that to you? I think what we're trying to do is get to the root cause of the problem is, what are you actually going to do in the 0-foot buffer? Are you going to put a building there? Or are you going to put stormwater detention? What's the end game?
we would be looking to put a stormwater detention basin on that, along that western property, because it's closest to the drainage way. However, the buffer doesn't allow that.
Which would go
And
through
you-
P and Z and us again.
So
Correct, but then I would have a buffer in place.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but what I'm saying is,
you would still have to go through Corps of Engineers permitting, floodplain permitting
We would not,
with the stormwater.
because we're outside the floodway. Our property lies entirely outside of the
I just want to confirm that.
FEMA identified map.
Thank you.
So I just have a question, and it sort of goes to trust, and that is, you removed trees out there when you weren't supposed to remove trees. Why did you do that?
I would, I know the property owner is here as well as his representative, if you would like. I can't answer that question. I'm an engineer, so I'm here to design things. I'm not a construction manager, so I would defer, if I may.
Yeah, you can come.
Will Reasoner with the Dickinson Law Firm, 699 Walnut Street, Suite 1600 in Des Moines. Represent the property owner. Bruce is going to come up and explain, but there is currently pending litigation about whether or not there was a violation to remove the trees. I think that, I mean, this is an open forum, and anything that we said here could be an admission. So I'm not trying to be cagey. I'm not going to tell Bruce to be cagey, but I mean, we disagree that it was a violation, but that's not what's before you now. So we're not arguing about whether or not it was a violation. We believe that the prior site plan was silent on there being a buffer, so there was not a buffer, so there was no violation. We're here today to clarify this, and that's what the request is.
what do you mean by silent?
Well-
If we only waive the setback, how can a buffer,
And prior to you answering, or prior to you finishing that, Rob, the approved site plan in 2013 specifically noted the existing tree line to be protected at. The verbiage was in the approved site plan.
And so I'm not here to litigate that at all. There's a discrepancy on where the arrows are pointing. That's all I'm saying. Bruce will come up and explain why they went ahead and did it. But I just want it to be understood in the context that the city has filed a lawsuit that is, it's not technically stayed, but we've got an extension on when to answer. And so we'll address that if we need to, but the purpose of the site plan today is that there's obviously a disagreement about what was right, what was wrong, but let's talk about what's common sense going forward and what makes sense. Do we need this 25-foot buffer when there's a 600-foot tree? So I'll let Bruce go ahead and answer the actual question now. Unless, did you have a question for me?
No, I thought your answer was sufficient, as far as I'm concerned.
Bruce can provide more information on why he did it, but I just wanted to lay out the outset that it's a legal matter too, but he can certainly explain why.
Come up, Bruce.
Sure.
evening, everyone. Bruce Begoon, address, 11584 Northwest 107th Court, Range, and property owner to 700 3rd Street. So, first of all, Mayor, I appreciate you asking the question. You're the first person in the month of July, first person last 7 months who has actually asked me the question. First one. And I would say simply this, I had about a third to a half acre of really bad timber. About a third of it was dead. About a third of it was broken and decayed or damaged from the derecho, and the rest of it was cottonwoods and locust trees and other things like that. And being very sensitive to the fact that we have a number of young children live in homes to the north of us, see them out playing in the woods, running around. We see tree limbs fall, other things like that. My insurance company was mortified about our liability in that situation. And so we brought in a company and we said, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve. We had dead, broken other trees, and it's either pick and choose or do it all. And the easiest thing to do was just to do it all. So, real simple answer.
Thank you.
Do you have any documentation of those conversations with your insurance company?
Not with me, but I can certainly.
It seems pretty coincidental to me that right before an expansion project, that you had a conversation about safety in that same area. So I'm just.
Again, you asked me, I told you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so we have before us, we've got another.
Allowed. Maybe you haven't had anybody ask you, but I've had lots of people ask me, what are they doing? Where are those trees coming down? Where are those trees piled up there? I can't even give you an estimate of how many people ask me that. I had to tell them I don't know. And I'm gonna make this as simple as I can. We just don't pull ordinances out of the air. We research them, spend a lot of time, sometimes money, sometimes a lot of money on deciding these ordinances. And when they're not followed, I have a problem with it. Whether we make exceptions, P&Z or Board of Adjustment. I don't like the idea that a lot of people put in a lot of work to get there to this position and then just ignore them. It doesn't sit well with me.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I go back to the position that we're in, and I care a lot more about the north border to the townhomes than I do the western border. It's not completely north-south, but again, the order in which we went through this doesn't seem to add up to me. And I don't know the best path forward, because I do think that this is an important corridor for us. It's obviously important for you, because that's where your business is. So I guess I'm inclined, maybe this is the path that you were going down, Dave, with taking no motion or no action on the motion today to return it to P&Z to have this larger conversation. Because I assumed, and I think that P&Z spent a good amount of their conversation on the type of buffer, which doesn't seem to apply here. And I realize that there is a municipal infraction or litigation in place, so that part of that needs to be separated from the plans. It makes it tougher for us to not see those plans, to know what we're doing. And I know that your answer is, well, that's because of the municipal infraction. I think the city's response would be that's because of the cutting down of the trees out of order. If there was some genuine misunderstanding on what happened here, that's one thing. I'm at a loss for what the best path forward is, I guess.
So
We've got a motion on the table.
we have a
and
motion on the
second.
table, we have a second.
So there is no alternative. Sending it back, can it go back for if it's if there's more info.
My opinion is you have the ability to send things back to P and Z to ask that they look at some additional information if you think you've got additional information to provide to them. Otherwise, if they've looked at everything that is before you, then the decision needs to be made by
Yeah, of
you.
course.
And so
I
basically,
just don't know that.
the only thing they didn't have were these pictures, right?
I wasn't there, but that's my
Correct.
understanding.
That's the only thing they didn't have, but several of them walked the property, correct, you said?
I was told several of them visited the site. I don't know the details behind what they did, but
I would have to look again. I think the assertion was that in the winter you could see through there.
and I can tell you that P and Z member Sires, how we got to this place was because Sires was adamantly against voting anything through. So the discussion became, we're going to say no if you're going to ask for a zero buffer. And then we started discussing what are some alternatives that we can offer the property owner. So they had some of the very same concerns you referenced, you know, the tree removal, the things done out of order, those kinds of things. That did not sit well with them, as you can imagine. So that was part of it. But then we got to a place that said there's litigation. We need to get them to bring the site into compliance. Where can we meet with them that P&Z could offer a recommendation they felt comfortable with to council? So there was discussion back and forth. They don't want a zero buffer, so what's the right number? The discussion then became around enforcement. So what they did is they basically mirrored the buffer and the type of the buffer that is on the north side of their property on the west side. So it was half of what our code requires, and it was a lesser buffer. Type C was the first one.
Yes, so you're.
And that's more trees, more restrictive. And so they said they would compromise to do half the buffer size and a lesser buffer. That's how they got to this recommendation.
Right.
Because
There was also some discussion about the intent of the Board of Adjustment ruling that eliminated the setback but didn't adjust the buffer.
And so some history on that Board of Adjustment meeting, based on the notes we have, based on the minutes we have, there was a formal request in the packet before the meeting of waiving both the building setback and the buffer requirements on the north side of the property. It was then brought up at the meeting, discussion of the 0-foot setback on the western property line. So based on the minutes, I can't tell you whether or not it was discussed, if the buffer requirement was even discussed at that meeting. But I know for a fact it was not in the waiver request that was presented as part of the packet beforehand to the Board of Adjustment. It was something that came up as part of the ongoing discussion during
So the request for Board of Adjustment was just
the original request was just the reduced type and width of the buffer on the northern property. Because your code requires any
but they changed the setback.
on the west as part of the, and so your face is kind of illustrating the confusion here. So the original request changed the building setback, the type of buffer, and the width on the north property. That's what was on the table before the meeting. During the meeting, and according to the minutes, it was then discussed, and the building setback western property line was waived.
What action did they take on the northern?
All
Three?
Yes. They basically approved the waiver as presented on the north. And then there was a discussion on the west that resulted in the 0-foot building setback with no action on it.
And a few of the P&Z commission members, granted, they do not govern the Board of Adjustments, but they voiced their opinion that the Board of Adjustments should never, paraphrasing, should never allow a zero setback. So since the Board of Adjustments, nobody can go back and change that, this was how P&Z felt they could control, making sure that there's never going to be anything within 25 feet of the property line, regardless of what's behind it. So if you send it back to P&Z, I'm fairly confident the answer is still gonna be no, they're not gonna allow 0. But I can't tell you if they'd be willing to compromise further as a recommendation. Ultimately, it'll be your all decision. But
They already compromised. It was 50,
correct.
50-foot type.
so they compromised already.
Yeah, and just so you guys are kind of aware, I don't know how familiar you are with buffer requirements, but essentially, type B is opaque to 3 foot year round with intermittent obstructions up to 20 feet tall, so basically trees. A type C is opaque to 6 foot tall year round with intermittent visual obstruction up to 20 feet. So essentially, you're knocking the opaque portion of that buffer down by a half by going to a type.
Okay, so we're back to having a motion and a second on the floor, and I haven't seen anything where anybody has said we need to do anything different, so let's, hearing none.
Before we, I want to make sure, clarification, if we vote no, how does this move forward with their site plan process?
I think they would be starting over again with the site plan process at that point. If you do not approve the site plans before you.
And in consideration of what they're proposing in a potential setback, the stormwater detention facility, how do they get through that?
They would have, well, they've got two different issues, and Travis, jump in, but the first issue that they've got to deal with is bringing the site into compliance now with whatever site plan you approve now. If that includes that 25-foot buffer, they would have to put that in, and then if their second portion of their site plan or their next site plan includes a detention area in that buffer, they would at that point be asking you to waive what you're approving tonight.
I guess I'm not so concerned about the compliance issue so much as moving forward so that a business owner in town can do something with the property, but I want to make sure it's done right so that we don't have to go back through this process again.
But that is what we're voting on.
I understand. I know that. I'm just voicing my concern here is we have a compliance issue that's trying to be rectified right now. That could be another potential issue down the road. So
if we don't, if we don't vote for, a no vote would be starting over, like you said. A yes vote would be moving forward with something that they would prefer not to have.
Or you could technically amend the resolution
Right.
to something else.
Yeah.
And you can do that with the motion that's on the floor, right?
Correct.
You would
You
amend
would
the
just be
motion.
amend the motion that you've got on the floor to change whatever portion of it you want changed.
And this is where I think P and Z, which was not put in a good position, we talked about before, was a little out of order in that there should never be a 0-foot setback because we will have a site plan submission, right? That's what it would be called for whatever plan that they were going to do for where buildings would be, detention ponds, a building, nothing, whatever, to that, in that 25 to 0-foot northern border.
So this motion, if we were all to vote in favor of it, would enforce a 25-foot wide setback, or buffer, excuse me. Then they would have to come back and ask for a waiver within that 25-foot setback for stormwater detention facility. Which
Detention.
I think if we're voting yes, we are actually concurring with planning and zoning because that's what they want. I just want to make sure that we're understanding the yes versus no here, because there's a feeling, there's an intent of saying no and making them go back. But I think if we say, yep, we're requiring a 25-foot buffer, they're still going to have to come back with some sort of variance or request for what they're wanting to build. Sure.
So all three of you have indicated who wants to go.
So, okay, you can come back up.
I'm guessing this is what Wally was just about to say. If the motion is amended now and you vote, or if the motion is not amended now and you vote yes, so there's going to be a 25-foot buffer, the intent is still to come forward with the next phase of the site plan, which would then include this detention basin with the request that you waive the buffer. And in the meantime, practically what that means is that stuff's gonna have to get planted to then potentially be. And so that's why we're asking now, is it's an efficiency thing going forward.
Right. So then is there the opportunity, I'm asking Councilman, for us to state in this motion, let's do as much as we can in this 25-foot buffer, knowing there's no sense in throwing good money after bad by planting trees to pull them out, to dig a hole, to plant trees around it.
So,
That's why we had the date set for October.
Yeah.
so and that's something too you could amend as part of the resolution. If you think October 1's too early, you could say October 31st, you could say November 15th, you know, and that would give if that's the path you want to go down, that would give the developer time to then revise or do another site plan amendment and not spend the money to plant the trees.
If we're coming back with a site plan for stormwater detention facility, I can digest that. If you're gonna come back and put a building there, no, that's not something
So to avoid the throwing good money and bad money, if you don't think October 1st allows them enough time to bring phase 2 of your site plan back, I think it's phase 2. Anyway, whatever phase it is, if you don't think it's enough time for them to do so, you could even make that date next spring. But then that way, they don't have to plant anything until they're able to come back in front of you.
So how did we come up with the October 1st deadline?
We put it together because it seemed like a reasonable time to get out of the really, really hot portion of the summer where those plantings are going to have the best chance to survive and yet get established before that was the idea. Moving it to October 31st probably doesn't impact that very much. I think if you start sliding it much further, you start risking overnight freezing may damage some of those smaller screening shrubs.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot easier to digest with a known versus an unknown for where things, if that's what, so you were saying to amend the,
basically I'm saying just in this, you don't need to just start planting trees immediately until we know what that site plan looks like.
but they're saying we would need to amend the motion on the table to not allow, or to allow for that. Say it wrong again.
A motion to amend the date by which the buffer would need to be planted.
I think the way it's written is the site plan improvements are.
Okay, so still has a 25-foot buffer, we're just pushing back the, is that a compromise that's acceptable?
Yeah,
Just
you can come
on
back
a-
up.
There might need to be an extra provision in the resolution.
Come back up.
There might need to be a resolution in the provision that says a second site plan may be submitted to council before completion of this site plan to be approved. Because if we're pushing the deadline out to October 15th or whatever it is, and nothing is planted, we don't have, the developer's not followed through with the site plan. But the purpose of pushing it out is to give time for the second site plan to be submitted. So what I'm getting at is there might need to be a provision in the resolution that you're voting on that says up until whatever the deadline is, a new site plan may be submitted. I don't want to run into a position where when we're here in October, there's questions about why didn't you comply with the deadlines in the first site plan that we just approved in July, when the intent here is to resubmit a new site plan.
But
for
it's just
approval.
the buffer, I thought, was everything else.
Well, so the way the resolutions, it's the paving and it's the buffer. And so, yeah, we could add something about the buffer planning specifically,
Right.
or the way that our
Yeah, I think that's the issue. It's
That-
the buffer,
That's what I'm
the
asking.
plantings, it's everything else, as I understood it,
Needs to be
needs to be done.
I'm talking about the buffer. Thank you for the clarification.
So,
And if the date, I guess maybe I'm oversimplifying, but whatever that date is, if they bring back a site plan prior to that date, they're not gonna be expected to be in compliance because it's before the date.
correct, yeah. So the way that your code is written, the approved site plan or the most recent amendment to that site would be the enforceable document. So if they were to come back with a second site plan, we wouldn't enforce we would enforce off of this one in that they can't undo any of this, but then they can modify it as needed for that additional site plan amendment.
Go.
So,
If I may, so if you read the buffer ordinance, it'll ask me to do grading, to create a berm, create a landscape buffer, create visual impact, which means that I have to do all that grading to make it compliant, because that's what the resolution will say, that we have to amend this current site plan.
So what date do you feel is acceptable for us to have in the resolution for that, to be in compliance? When can you bring a second site plan forward?
That is a very difficult question for us, and I'm just saying, in all sincerity, the first plan that we got caught up on is architecturally, we're having troubles getting architects to finish plans and get us drawings for the buildings. And I kept telling Chelsea, I'm sorry it's delayed, I'm sorry, I'm doing my site, I can get my site plan stuff in a jiffy. But some of the stuff, like building materials that we can't get, I mean, we're ordering buildings right now for all the projects we do for Casey's, Scooters, Hy-Vee Gas, Fast and Fresh. I mean, we're out 14 to 16 weeks before I can even get materials. And then the problem with the site plan with a building is that it asks for all that architectural stuff. And that's the part that I don't control, right? So then that puts me in a pickle, because I'm like, well, to make it compliant with the site plan, we're gonna have to grade it, plant all the trees in by the date we get it figured out. I'm just not certain what to do here at this point.
I would like to see I'd like to see some sort of firm date, because as you all know, this has been going on since December of 22, and
Yep.
there were several months that you guys missed to get a submittal in. So I think we need a firm date here, and I think October 31st is fair. I mean, can we allow for there to be October 31st, and then we could possibly have another additional provision in there if we need to?
I don't know why building materials comes into this. You don't need any of that for a site plan.
Yeah, you have to have the architectural standards and lighting and all of that goes with
But
it.
he's talking about getting materials.
You have
Oh,
to
but
write
he
down.
doesn't
the
know
work.
he doesn't know what materials to put in there, I think is the,
You have to have materials picked out. You don't have to have the building materials in.
right.
You can go through the materials. Well, I want that one. And if I can't get that one, here's a substitute.
I think if the council's gonna proceed with motion that's on the table, we need to have a firm date of when they need to have a site plan brought back. So technically, they could meet our October planning and zoning meeting, correct? So that would need to be submitted mid-September.
Yes.
If you were to amend the date to October 31st, as long as they hit the October P and Z, you would be able to act on it before the expiration of that date.
all right, so do we want to, so how do we, I mean,
Got
we
a
could go
motion
back
on
and
the
forth
table
forever
in a
on
second.
this.
So if any of that needs
So
to be
let's-
changed, you have a motion to amend the motion that's on the table and state whatever you're changing. So it would be a motion to amend the date in the resolution.
This is a new motion.
It's a new motion, but then you'll go back and vote on the amended motion. So the only thing you need to make a decision on now is whether you want to change anything that is in the motion that there has already been a first and a second. So if you're wanting to change that date, or in the alternative, those of you who did the first and the second, if you want to just I amend my motion to change the date of October 1st to October 31st, that will do it also.
To you, Dave.
I'd like to amend my motion, change the date from October 1st to October 31st.
Do you second that vote?
Second.
Well, I don't understand why we can't. If he wants to talk to the point that we're,
Who wants to talk? Oh, I didn't see his hand. What have you got? Come up, please. And then we're gonna wrap it up.
Again, respectfully, so two things. One, I think we're overlooking a bit of a disturbing point for me, and that's the fact that, in 2013, we got a variance that, in our mind, said we can use the entirety of our property for development. And now, in 2023, we're deciding we don't like that, and so we're going to take some action to make an adjustment to that. I sincerely am concerned as a property owner, as a business owner, that you're basically going back into work. You told me I could do something, and now you're telling me, well, but we didn't like what they did 10 years ago, so now we're gonna change it.
How are we changing anything
The
that Board
buffer,
of Adjustment did?
the buffer,
They didn't remove the buffer, so we're
that's a point of discussion, so now, enough said, I'm just making a comment. The second thing is, when it comes to the execution of the site plan and then the potential for the second phase of the site plan and timing and dates and everything else, here's my concern with that. I have no problem with the compliance issue. I want to get the compliance done, much as everybody else wants to get the compliance done. We're just trying to get through the process so we can get it done, all right? My concern is that if we are doing something and tying a second site plan into the compliance component, based upon what's changed, when we go back and reevaluate things, it may significantly affect our plans. It may significantly affect our plans, so our available space and things to do, which is ours to deal with, but I don't necessarily, it almost seems like we're kind of tying our hands. Let's finish one thing and then we'll deal with the other. And I'm okay with that. Rather than tying one into the other, because the other one could have a significant change to it, or quite frankly, it might not make any sense.
So, but a lot of us are operating, we don't know what your site plan is. Because you didn't get your site plan in.
Oh, yes, we did.
I thought we don't have a site
That
plan.
you didn't include a site plan with the building additions. We've
We
not
initially
seen,
started with the site plan.
but we've not seen an actual site
So-
plan submittal.
So we've seen a first and a second submittal, and there were outstanding comments on the buildings. Pell's Design Services, in their response memo, informed us that they were opting to remove the additional construction from their site plan in order to expedite the site.
And I don't want to be the bad guy, but I want you to all have all the information necessary, regardless if there was a misinterpretation between what the city believed was in place and what the property owner believed was in place. The removal of the trees, as the lawyer mentioned, in their opinion, wasn't illegal. But from a city operational standpoint, they would have still had to, for the amount that they removed, they would have still had to do a grading permit or some type of a permit, regardless of their understanding of what the site plan amendment, what the approved site plan was. So I want to be clear that we're not trying to tie anybody's hands. We're saying that proper processes weren't followed, regardless of understanding. And we need to move forward with something. And if the concern of moving forward is date, because they don't want to put good money after bad, then it's a date. But if the concern is we can't have another site plan for 2 years, I don't know with litigation that we can continue to stay that long.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, let's come to something that we can, that we can resolve and be done with, so we can resolve our litigation. That's what's driving everything, is the whole litigation situation. Let's get to something that we can resolve, be done with that, then go to a second or extended site or something.
Well, you said enough was said on that topic, despite the fact that it's a city council meeting. Last time I checked, I'm on city council, so anybody gets to decide when enough has been said on the topic. It should be me and not you. And if you want to go that route, then let the litigation go and have a judge decide it down the road.
Well, and the way I see it, it's not tying to a site plan or a second plan or anything like that. It's saying, we're giving you more time to present a better case for, additional anything like that. So I think moving forward by saying, what's reasonable time, I think we're being, we're leaving a door open for future conversations. I think it allows us to move forward. This was brought because of an infraction. There were, steps not followed. whether there were misunderstandings, whatever, we're here because things were done improperly. We have an issue we're trying to move forward on. And I think we could take the hard route and say, fix it now. Or I think we could say, you know what, let's move forward with a site plan that's in conformance, have a plan to address the outstanding issues, but give you time to try to come up with a reasonable plan rather than going out and planting things you may have to remove in the future. So I think, again, we're trying to find a reasonable path forward, in my opinion.
I do think October 31st is a very fair amount of time to get it done, and, you know, if they need an additional extension, I suppose they could ask for it.
Because there would be a mechanism for if they wanted to go back and either amend this or like reset the completion date, you know, the architects aren't getting back to them, whatever it may be, there's delays being incurred, we're trying to work through some details in the site plan, and then you decide in November, you know, there's a mechanism by which we can.
Request could be made at that time, but right now your motion on the floor is for October 31st.
And so we have a motion on the floor for October 31st. And we have had a second on it, and we need a roll call. Roll call, please.
Vogel, Anderson,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
DeVore, Sarchet.
Yes.
All right, so then do we go back to the resolution?
No, because of the way in which we did it, they just agreed to amend the original motion.
So we're
you
gonna
to
move
the
on,
next item.
move on to item B then. Thank you, everybody, for all the discussion. Item B, Resolution 2023-92, authorizing and approving a certain loan agreement, providing for the issuance of $3,550,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2023, and providing for the levy of taxes to pay the same. Chelsea?
So tonight we are asking the city council to finalize our general obligation bond sale by approving the loan agreement in the amount of $3,550,000 and providing for the issuance of the general obligation corporate purpose bond 2023. The proceeds from the bond sales will be for the following projects: North Side Drive realignment, street repair project, and trail project not to exceed $1,375,000. Trail project along Bridge Road not to exceed $275,000. Police equipment not to exceed $200,000, and City Hall not to exceed $1,750,000.
Okay, so we'll have a motion and a second, and then any discussion.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, let's call the roll, please.
DeVore,
Yes.
Sarchet,
Yes.
Vogel,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yep.
Walters.
Yes.
Moving on to C, second reading of ordinance 2023-9200, amending chapter 165.23, Board of Adjustment. I'll just ask for a motion on that, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Sarchet,
Yes.
Vogel,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
DeVore.
Yes. And then item D is Snyder and Associates May 2023 Engineering Services invoice in the amount of $35,411.75. Motion, please. Thank you.
Second.
Roll?
Vogel,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Walters, DeVore, Sarchet.
Yes.
So we'll move.
So just because it was a sizable difference with just a,
I
Okay.
missed the second page. All me.
it's not
Right.
why I was asking, I just didn't know if it was.
So moving on to item number 9, we'll begin with staff. Anything? Okay. And Chelsea, anything?
I do not have anything to report.
Council?
Yeah, so week of the festival, usually pretty excited, a little bit tired, but definitely tired and still excited, but this year, more than most, quite honestly, has been a little bit problematic with the planning, and there's been even a little bit more frustrating here at the end. Disappointed to see the Legion scheduling a second concert during the scheduled Square concert. So trying to work through that. I don't know that there's going to be a good resolution, but unfortunate, and really still am looking forward to what looks like good weather for a change. So that's a positive, but looking forward to the festival nonetheless. But I definitely think some deep conversations about direction and a lot of what led to where we are now, and hopefully still a good festival, and in subsequent years a little bit better planning behind it.
Else? Okay, I just say I'm looking forward to a good festival too. So we'll then move on to item 10, a motion to go into a closed session.
So moved. Second.
And roll, please.
Dvorak,
Yes.
Sarchet, Vogel,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Walters.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're invited to stay for that, please do. If not, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Give me just 2 minutes.
You